This book is so amazing that Mark Cuban has said if he had a choice to invest in a company created by somebody with an MBA or created by somebody who has read this book, he would pick the latter. Mind-blowing, right? Hi everyone, I'm Ahana and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be discussing about this book called Rework. It is one of the most popular books of our time and it has been recommended by the biggest names in business, and I'm going to talk about a few major lessons that I have learned from this book and why you should give this a read. First of all, let's talk about the authors. So this book is written by David Hansson and James Fried. David Hansson is the creator of Ruby on Rails, which is a framework on which many web apps are built. For example, Twitter is like one of the most popular ones. And he's also Jason Fried's business partner in 37 Signals. Jason Fried has created 37 Signals and it is a software development company with many innovative products like Basecamp, Highrise and Campfire. And this company is widely successful and he has put some very unconventional but extremely effective lessons that he has learned throughout his career and throughout his journey in building a business into this book. And this is what I love about books, right? When people's entire life stories, life journeys, all of these lessons can be compiled into this very neat little 300 odd page bundle. It's fascinating to me. So that is why I really enjoy reading non-fiction books. And you can click right here to see all of the other book reviews that I have done so far. And let me know in the comments below if you want me to do any other popular book reviews, and I'm definitely going to be up for it. So the authors mention a few key pointers which not always groundbreaking but are still pretty unconventional. So I want to take you through them one by one, and I will also give you what my personal opinion is on each of them and what I felt after listening to these things. And yes, listening, not reading, because I actually read this book on Audible. So yeah, here goes. So first, what everybody says, this meeting should have been an email. Yeah, they think meetings are toxic. Nothing good ever happens in meetings and it's just a way for teams to keep, talking back and forth and no decision actually gets taken. In my experience, that's not entirely true, but I can understand why at an executive level, at like a CEO level, you would feel like some meetings are completely redundant and all you need to do is take quick actions, quick decisions. When you are an employee just starting out, then I feel like every meeting is an opportunity for you to learn, to understand everyone else's perspective, to maybe put forth a different idea if you have any. So all of these things, like in my experience of working for 2 years, that is what I have felt. So I don't fully agree with this, but that's one of the points that they had mentioned. Second, ASAP is poison, and I fully agree with it. Nobody knows what ASAP means. It is so subjective, and ASAP, as soon as possible, for me is not what is possible for you. If I ask you to do something ASAP, in my head I might be thinking that I need it in the next 10, 15, 20 minutes, and for you are completely swamped with work, and for you what is possible is maybe tomorrow or the end of the week, and it's not possible for me to know that. So they suggest that you need to give them proper timelines, set their expectations, set your expectations according to their availability, and then come up with the next steps and see how you can prioritize your current work so that you are able to deliver it in the set timelines. Even if you're not managing your own business and you are just an employee like I am, and you just have like your own work to manage, even then when people come to you for different kinds of work, when you need to go to someone for different kinds of requirements, all of these things you need to keep in mind that ASAP does not cut it. You have to set proper timelines and also prioritize so that you can deliver on those timelines. The third thing they say is inspiration is perishable, which is kind of along the lines of how discipline is something that you need to go towards, and motivation and willpower is a depletable resource. All of these things you keep seeing on Pinterest boards and everywhere. So at first it is all about motivation, about getting inspired, getting motivated, getting started. It's what triggers your action, but then your action should be such that you can build it into a habit and have that discipline to maintain that habit. Otherwise, without that, we will not be able to progress at all. I don't remember who this author was, but they had this quote: I only write when inspiration strikes, and luckily for me, inspiration strikes every morning at 9 o'clock, which is basically saying that they are kind of in the habit, they have formed this discipline that they will write every morning at 9 a.m. no matter what. So that is kind of what we also need to build towards. We can't wait to be inspired all of the time. Sometimes you need those bursts of inspiration and energy to trigger you into action, but then the action is what needs to keep you going. Next is don't learn from your mistakes. And this was such a refreshing take, because everywhere, all of the self-help books and of that, anything of that genre, they will all tell you that learn from your mistakes, failures are a stepping stone to success and so on. But what these authors are saying here is completely different. They say that failures is not a prerequisite to success. You don't have to fail in order to succeed, and actually mistakes don't really teach us much, because what it tells you is this way will not work. Like, there's this very famous quote by Thomas Alva Edison when he was trying to invent the light bulb, and he had said, I have not failed 10,000 times. I have just learned the 10,000 ways that this will not work. And while that is extremely inspirational and of course very true, but what these authors are trying to say is that the number of ways that it will not work still does not lead you to the way that it will work. Like, at least it's not a direct road. It's a very roundabout and very cumbersome road. And they have quoted a Harvard Business School study which has said that entrepreneurs who have succeeded in creating a startup, have already made a successful startup, are more likely to continue making successful startups, while entrepreneurs who have failed once do not really have much of a probability of creating a successful startup than somebody who's never tried. So what this kind of signifies is that successful people know what works and they continue doing it repeatedly, and that's what leads them towards more success, while the people who failed are still kind of struggling to understand why they have failed and trying to incorporate ways which are different from their current method in order to succeed, but that might not be a sure thing. Now, my opinion on this is that I kind of half agree with it, because yeah, of course, it's not a straight path. It doesn't tell you just because you fail doesn't mean that you will succeed next time, but you shouldn't stop trying just because of that. Like, if you continue to think that only people who have become successful will continue to be successful and people who've failed once cannot do that same thing, then it kind of wrings out all of the hope from any kind of situation, right? So I don't believe in that at all. I feel like with enough hard work and a decent amount of luck, a lot of things are possible. You can definitely learn from the failures of presently successful people and see how they have kind of recovered themselves, how they have grown, and maybe you can emulate a few steps and you will figure it out eventually along the way. As long as you don't stop trying, I think there is still a chance to succeed. Next, planning is guessing, and as a hardcore planner girl, this is really difficult for me to hear, but I kind of get their point. So when I was in college, I was completing my MBA. I graduated in 2020, and when we were having our placements around the end of 2019, there were all of these companies coming in and talking to us about their vision 2020 and how they plan to build for the next decade and all of that. There was very big plans and great ideas and brilliant strategies all across the board, but nobody had ever imagined that we will be facing a global pandemic right after the first quarter of 2020. It was unimaginable. There are so many factors at play, and you can make all of the plans that you want to make, but unless you are ready to adapt those plans, nothing will change. So what you are making is essentially a guess, because you don't know what is going to be in the future. And as much as it is true for big businesses, I also think a large part of it is also true for our own lives. I read these books to kind of extrapolate these lessons to my personal life. So what I have been thinking after reading this part was that even if you're managing a small team, even if you are not working, maybe you're just managing your family, that whole thing, you can plan as much as you want to. Like people say, life happens, right? So a number of things can go wrong, or maybe they'll just be different than what you imagined it to be, and then you need to adjust your plan accordingly. So what they are basically saying in this book is that you can plan as much as you want to. Planning is just guessing, and once you're done with your plans, focus on the execution, because when you are executing, a lot of things that might have been right at the time of planning might not be relevant anymore at the time of doing. So just pivot, adjust your focus, and make newer plans, and what they think is that short-term plans are more effective than long-term plans, which also sort of makes sense. Like if you have a 5-year vision, then a lot of things are variable in that 5-year vision, but if you have more of a monthly or a yearly vision, that's easier to control and easier to stick to, like the original vision. So that's what I would suggest. Like even personally, if you kind of break down your bigger goals into smaller goals, then it's easier to be aligned to your larger goal, but also kind of, you know, keep achieving smaller goals along the way. Next is growth is not always the goal. So there's this really nice example in the book where they say that you don't always have to make your business really big in order for it to be relevant or in order for it to be great. You know, if you're talking about, say, a Harvard or a Cambridge, are you going to say that it will be a better college, it would be a better university if they had more of it, if they had more branches across the world? No, right? Because Harvard or Cambridge are great as universities, as institutions, because they just are. They don't need to keep growing. They don't need to have multiple branches everywhere in order to become good. That's what they're saying, that sometimes even if your business is at a small scale of operations and it's sustainable, it is profitable, and you are comfortable with that pace, then stick to it. Then there is no need to grow your business just for the sake of growing it. And my personal view on this is that I 100% agree with it. You know, a lot of people feel like this normal 9-to-5 job is not for me and they look down upon it, or maybe they have like a small business which they are doing pretty well for themselves. They can, you know, take care of themselves, they can take care of their family, they don't need to really worry about finances in general, but they will see somebody else, you know, growing and getting millions of views and likes and followers and making sales in lakhs and crores, and then they get a little intimidated and then they feel like maybe that should have been me, and then they try to do something which is not sustainable for them. And I personally do not think that the scale of success is same for everyone, whether it's an individual, whether it's a business. So if you might become CEO of some company and then you will be miserable, or you are not, maybe you won't find time to be in touch with your family, and that's what is most important to you, then what is the point? Maybe you would be much happier being like at 3-4 levels lower than the CEO and still getting all of that time with your loved ones, and maybe that is the right balance for you. These are the things that the authors are asking us to figure out for ourselves, for our businesses, specifically in this context they mean businesses, that you don't need to hire like 50 people across the world and then you think that you will have like a billion-dollar company, and that is never true. For some of us, maybe the right scale of a business is just you and your laptop. So that's just, you know, a personal thing. You have to figure it out for yourself, what pace, what scale you are comfortable with, and then you go from there. A lot of these new startup companies hire and fire like crazy. Like we've seen all over LinkedIn mass layoffs happening, and it's kind of really scary that a lot of these companies are growing at a huge scale and they're not sustainable, and they make these drastic decisions and it affects the lives of so many people. So yeah, I feel like a business needs to be sustainable and profitable, whether big or small. That depends on you. Next is my favorite, hustle culture. So the authors are basically saying that hustle culture is completely pointless, and people who are just working late for the sake of working late are not saving the day, they're just using up most of it. And I absolutely love this line. Like they are saying that most people who are workaholics, they kind of force the normal people who would have gotten their work done in normal hours, just stay back in office, you know, just to give that impression that they are also working, in case the person who's working longer is perceived as working harder. But that's not always true. If you are working for longer hours, most of the time it just says that you are working for a long time. It does not say how much work you got done. It does not say anything about your productivity or efficiency. It just says something about the time that you're taking to get something done. And they say that the real heroes are not the people who are working really into the wee hours of the night. The real heroes are the people who have completed their work within the work hours and are at home now recharging. And this is really essential to avoid burnout, and because once you burn out, it's very, very difficult to get back in the game. Personally, I'm really grateful to work for a company where work-life balance is one of our main priorities. And even with very senior leaders, I have seen that they have a very clear distinction between work and life. And you know, you are definitely allowed your weekends and your time offs with your family, friends, do whatever you want to do. But when you are at work, you're expected to bring your best self. And because we are allowed that time away from work, we are able to do that. So I really feel like this clear distinction is very important so that you don't burn out and you are able to deliver your best work as well. And the final point was, you don't need as much money as you think. Yeah, hear me out. Everybody needs more money than they currently have, I know. But this is about starting a business. They say that, you know, when you are starting a business, you don't have to directly go and start with like the biggest office or the most expensive resources or hiring like a huge team. Don't do that. Just have your core product, have the main things ready, and then start building on it slowly. Like they use the example of like an Android software launch. So when you give an update one after the other, and then you slowly build on the product that you are trying to create. But when you start, you just have your core product, make it really good, make it very usable, and put a lot of yourself into the product. So the authors say that don't quit your day job. First, test the waters, see that if it is something that you actually are enthusiastic enough about, and it has to be something that really excites you, because otherwise you're not going to, you know, continue with it for a long period of time. And they also say that don't just jump into, you know, getting investors and starting crowdfunding and all of that. Just start with what you have, build the minimum product, see if there are any takers for that, and slowly you can build on it, update it as you go along, as your company grows, as you see more success. There is no need to start right away with something with a ton of features and then you find no takers for it, because that does not make any sense. And they say that you have to focus on the core of your business and launch the product as soon as your core is ready. So I found a way to apply this to my life. So there is a quote which says, anything worth doing is worth doing badly. And of course, in terms of a business, when you are talking, you can't really give them anything bad, so to speak. But what this quote basically means is that when you are doing something, doing the bare minimum is also good enough, because it is still worth doing. So that's in that sense, like when they are talking about a product for a company, doing the main, like the MVP is good enough to start with than doing nothing. So in terms of your personal life, it just means that doing the bare minimum. So like a 10-minute walk is better than no activity for the whole day. And definitely a 1-hour workout session is better than a 10-minute walk, but a 10-minute walk is better than nothing. That's kind of how I work it around for myself. So I try to make all of these lessons that I learned from the books relevant for me, even if, you know, they are not really talking about the stage of life that I am in. But that's why I like reading non-fiction books, because there are so many lessons and it's adaptable in so many ways. These points were a very small part of how much information packed this book is. So I really enjoyed reading it. It was a very enlightening read for me, and it was also very instructive. It was not something that is preachy. It's something that is actually telling you, you know, action steps to do. And especially because I was listening to it on Audible, the narration was a very action-oriented kind of tone. So I loved this book. I love listening to it, and I love all of the lessons within it. Let me know in the comments down below what your favorite part of this book was, and what is the next book that you want me to review. And I'll see you next week. Bye.